My name is Erin. I am 70-9. I live in a modest house on the outskirts of the town, where the air smells of gasoline, mold, and indifference. The walls here are thin, like the skin on old hands. Everything is heard, the cries of children, of neighbors, the roar of the garbage truck, the rustle of loneliness. Once upon a time, this house was full of votes. The wife laughed, the children ran barefoot, the dog was extinguishing the garden. I was a trunk for this family, strong, straight, reliable. Now everything is different. I wake up early, a habit that remains since every minute has a price. I cook breakfast myself. 1 egg, toast. Coffee is without milk because I forgot to buy. And maybe I just didn't want to see again how the cashier in the store translates my eyes when I stand with 3 things and a trifle in the wrinkled palm. She looks everywhere. Like everyone. My son is the CEO of something important. Daughter, abroad, at seminars about psychological concern for parents. Irony? No, just cynicism in a shiny wrapper. Grandchildren? One looks at me like dust on the shelf, just interfere. The second, never removes the headphones. My words in him, a background. White noise. I do not listen to me in the clinic. This is age, the doctor says, without raising his eyes. The store is like a shadow between racks. On the street, as if I was in a museum, an exhibit without a plate. I live. But for them, I am gone. Every day, like a repetition of blurred sleep. I sit in a chair, look at the window where nothing happens. Even the trees seem tired. They also do not want to grow more. When the son calls, he does not ask how I am. He verifies the lists. Did you drink medicines? Did you pay for gas? I say, yes, son. Although I would like him to ask, you're not alone, Dad? But it will take too long. And time is a resource that is not spent on old ones. Sometimes I open an old box with photos. I look at the young, strong face in army. There I am, another. Full strength, fire, confidence. Now the mirror gives me the face of a person who is no longer needed. The inner void grows. She is not silence. She is a deaf pain. As when a screwdriver is in the heart but you can't get it. And no one sees the wound. Because the old grandfather in a knit sweater is outside. I started talking to myself lately. It's not madness. It's defense. Because if you are silent, it gets worse. Then you begin to believe that you really are not. Today I was sitting on a bench in the park. Near me, to have a baby. The boy looked at me, studying. His mother whispered, "Don't be smoking, he is so strange." I smiled. I don't know why. Probably not to cry. Because there is nothing left but bitterness. I feel like something changes in me. It's not anger. This is silence that takes shape. Like a rotten tree, it still stands outside, but inside is a void, a tube. And I know, if a little more, it will fall. And under the wreck will be those who forgot that it once gave. I often think of the times when my name mattered. Not as a title. Not as a number on a list. But as a promise. Erin is someone who keeps her word. Someone who will never leave. Someone who will stand up, even when she can't. I was drafted into the army when I was 20. Hot, stubborn, with hands that didn't yet know how to shake. I've seen death. It has different faces, the face of a comrade who didn't live to be evacuated, the face of an enemy who had a letter to his mother in his pocket. But I survived. Because I had to. Because someone had to come back and keep the house. After the war, I returned to the void. The streets recognized me, but they didn't wait. I started from nothing, with a cold garage and a soldering iron in my hands. Working with my hands was the only thing that gave me peace. I wasn't afraid of dirt. The business grew, slowly, stubbornly, just like me. Eventually, they started recognizing me. A handshake meant a deal. My word was a contract stronger than any piece of paper. When my son was born, I held him in my arms and whispered, "You won't know what fear is." When Marta, my wife, died, I didn't cry in front of my children. Only at night, when the silence was suffocating. I didn't let myself fall. I held them like a roof over their heads, even when the walls were cracking. They respected me. They came to me for advice. I gave them jobs, taught them, helped them. And now? Now my voice is like the rustle of a newspaper being blown off the shelf by the wind. I think about how much of myself I left in this family, in this city, in these people. I fed them, protected them, built them. And now, when I say something, my grandson grimaces, "Oh, come on, Grandpa, you're out of the loop." Maybe so. Only me was the theme of their survival. Time is a cunning thing. It doesn't just take away youth. It steals meaning. It has sharp fingers, it extracts meaning from things, people, relationships. The word "dad" has become a monthly bell. Grandpa is a sarcastic address. When I look at myself in the mirror, I see eyes that remember. They remember how I went to negotiate with people who were considered predators, and came out of there with a deal. They remember how I saved my brother from debt. They remember how I carried my daughter to the hospital on foot because the car stalled at night and her temperature was under 40. I built an empire, for them. And they built a wall of silence around me. When I try to tell something, they look at their watch. Everything seems boring to them. It's funny. It seems to them that the stories of the old are just dust. And I see, their news are shadows of what I once walked barefoot. I am an archive. And they are new pages that never read the old ones. I feel that something has changed not in me, but in the world. Now power is volume. Appearance. And not a word that does not betray. Not a hand that does not tremble at a decisive moment. In the silence of my home, among photographs and medals, I understood, they do not want to remember. Because memory obliges. And it is easier for them to forget. But I do not forget. I am memory. I am the one who observes. And the one who will no longer just sit in the shadows. Lately I have learned to be silent correctly. There is a silence that is confused, and there is a silence that is measured. The kind that records. I keep a diary. Not out of sentimentality, but out of necessity. There are names. Dates. Words that cut. It all started with a conversation over dinner. My son is confident, well-dressed, with a gaze that glides, not stares. We thought. Maybe it's time to take proper care of you. There is a wonderful boarding house. Private. Comfort. Do you want to send me to a nursing home? That doesn't sound like it, Dad. But that's exactly what it sounded like. I am everything to him. And he is comfort. The boarding house. Eternal silence. I nodded. Because the anger was too great to express in words. In the diary I wrote, Mark. Son. Boarding house. 5:45 p.m. By the fireplace. It smelled of garlic. That same week, I heard my grandson, Evan, laughing with his friend in the living room. My grandfather really thinks we're going to listen to him. Honestly, like some rotten record from the 90s. I stood outside the door. My hand clenched on the stick. Not out of pain, out of shame for him. Evan. Grandson. Rotten record. 2:10 p.m. A bottle of cola. We sat on the carpet. My daughter called. Dad, I'm really struggling right now. My husband and I can't afford your medicine either. I didn't ask for money, daughter. I just wanted to, you often do. But time is not rubber. I heard her child crying. And she told me about the lack of time. Ellie. Daughter. Time is not rubber. 9:27 a.m. Window. Fog. And then the doctor. Bald, with a white mask and a thin smile. You see, Mr. Erin, at your stage in life, pain is the norm. We're not going to do an MRI every time just because something is pressing there, are we? I looked at him, and he only saw a number in the system, not a person. Dr. Melnick. Your stage of life. 1:40 p.m. It smelled of bleach. His fingers held a pen, not a hand. I don't forget. Every entry in the diary is a wound they didn't see. But I saw everything. I remembered every look, every move of an eyebrow, every minute when I became superfluous. Not unnecessary, because I was still functional. But unnecessary. Unprofitable. Inconvenient. And here's the climax. It came without thunder, without music, an ordinary day. I was walking down the street. I slipped, fell. A curved sidewalk tile. My knee hurt. I raised my head. People were walking by. I held out my hand, "Madam, please." She stopped. Looking down at me like a poor dog. "You're all just waiting to be pitted, aren't you?" And she left. And a few more laughed. One took a photo. I was lying in a puddle, and the water under my pants was cold, like what I had become for the world. And then it became quiet. But not around me. Inside me. In that silence, something else was born. Not a scream. A decision. I got up on my own. I returned home. My hands were shaking, but my mind was cold and clear. I sat down at the table. I opened my diary. For the first time, not to record my pain. But to make a plan. That night my house was no longer empty. Its walls seemed to breathe. The silence was not oppressive, it listened. I sat at the table, and another being was being born inside me. It didn't scream. It counted. I wasn't interested in a fight. Not anger. Anger is an emotion of the young. It passes quickly. And something cold was maturing in me. Patience. Mechanism. Game. Those who consider the old weak forget one thing: we have time. And memory. I pulled an old notebook out of hiding. There were the names of people with whom fate had once brought me together. Not all of them were friends. But among them were those who knew how to influence. I contacted one of them, Wilkins, a former private investigator. Now a consultant on reputational risks. We met at night, in his garage, like two ghosts of the old world. "Do you really want to do this?" "I don't want to. I must." He nodded. In his eyes I saw not condemnation, but respect. We were no longer old. We were alive. The plan began to take shape. Not physical destruction. But the destruction of the image. The psychological reconstruction of the life of everyone who betrayed. I started with my son. Mark is a public figure. A project leader who declares family values. A couple of old records that I had saved from his youth were enough for me. And Wilkins found the rest. I anonymously forwarded these files to a journalist with whom I had once helped avoid bankruptcy. The article appeared under the headline, "The Double Life of a Successful Dad." The reaction? Calls. Panic. Loss of sponsors. Mark did not know what had become the source. And that was the sweetest thing. The granddaughter who had once thrown in my face, "You were never modern," fell into the net of her own game. I created a fake profile, entered her online circle. I threw in the information that she used to publicly expose her friend. And when it turned out to be a trap, she found herself in the middle of a cancellation, losing all her brand contracts. It all seemed like a coincidence. But it was architecture. Mine. With my daughter, it was different. I didn't want pain. I wanted awareness. I set up a meeting with her old patient, whom she had once failed to help, refusing a free consultation. I organized a private scene, in a coffee shop, where he approached her, thanked her, for not giving him a chance. She cried, not understanding where he had come from. And I stood nearby, holding a newspaper. Like a random passerby. I acted without a name, without evidence, without presence. I was a shadow. But every mistake they made, every indifference they sowed, sprouted into planned horror. I wasn't interested in punishment. I was interested in awareness. I wanted them to feel that everything was possible to lose. And that their forgotten father was not a shadow, but the architect of retribution. I sat in my house, in a silence that now made sense. I did not play the victim. I led the game. And every time another piece fell on the board, I made a note in my journal: now you will know what it means to be unheard. Like I did in your childhood, Ellie. 10. I do not call for death. I give mirrors. And force you to look into them without being able to look away. When the game was gaining momentum, I understood, I'm not alone. Silence prevailed in my house, but it was another silence. She was breathing side by side. She listened to my steps. It was not loneliness. It was order. I was sitting in a chair, looking at an old globe that was spinning slowly like a world that finally turned around me again. I did not take revenge with anger. My every step is logical. I built their reality as they once destroyed mine. The daughter no longer participated in online seminars about psychological maturity, because a video, where she screams in her child and her baby, was drained into her parents' chats. The video was real. Her shame is even more true. The son was late for work every day. His driver, who was a relative of my old friend from the army, suddenly began to confuse routes. Then, the leakage of information. And the son was forced to resign, so as not to destroy the whole business. The press was told briefly. The sharp end of a brilliant career. And I put this newspaper tenderloin in the album, next to a photo where he still holds my hand. The grandson, who's disrespectfully curved, lost confidence in the university. Anonymously I handed it to the teacher, a sample of his essay, copied from the internet. There will be no court cases. But he received the status of academic risk. For the first time in his life, he felt responsible. I did not destroy, I awakened conscience. As no one taught him before. Every action is not accidental. Everything is decorated. Purely. Coldly. Reasonably. I started writing a diary systematically. He became not just a collection of records, but a manifesto. Philosophy of retribution. Not for the crowd. For those who want to forget again, who is old age. I wrote. Revenge is not a cry. It is an order in a world where youth considers itself immortal. When they laughed, I was silent. Now they are silent when I'm in action. Old hand, still remembers how to keep a knife not for injury, but for truth. My old acquaintances, those who have not completely lost their spine, contacted themselves. I helped someone with a word. Someone is a file. 2 of them resumed their business after decades. The other, he saw his grandson again because he reminded his son that his grandfather knew more than it seems. I did not become a villain. I became a warden. Shadow behind the shoulder of indifference. Impulse in the spinal cord of conscience. Everyone thought I was a toothless old man. And I was, forgotten weapons. And they activated me. When her daughter arrived in a month, she sat silently opposite. Eyes are empty, devastated. I poured her tea. We were silent. And in this silence she suddenly said, "Dad. I'm ashamed." I didn't answer. I just gave her a diary. Not all. The first part. The one where it was only painful, without cold logic. She cried. Real. And it was for the first time in 20 years, when I saw in her eyes not a daughter on graphics, but a baby with the eyes of guilt. I didn't expect thanks. I knew there wouldn't be any. There wouldn't be tears on my knees, there wouldn't be apologies over loudspeakers. Because society doesn't apologize to those it has neglected. It just changes its perspective. Now, when I go into a store, the cashier looks me in the eye. Not for long. But she does. At the doctor's, a notepad appears. "How are you feeling, Mr. Erin?" she asks. Not because I've become stronger. But because he's become more cautious. The neighbors suddenly started remembering that I once fought. That I created a company that still employs their relatives. They began to respect my experience again. Not out of love. But out of a sense of presence. I became a silhouette to be reckoned with again. Not out of fear. Out of a dignity that can no longer be ignored. My family. It's not the same anymore. Mark has learned to listen. Slowly, reluctantly, but listen. He comes more often. He brings newspapers. We drink coffee in silence. Sometimes he even asks for advice. He doesn't always do it. But he asks. That's enough. My daughter gave me a new notebook. "If you ever want to write again," she said. "But maybe this time, without pain." I smiled. Because pain doesn't go away. It becomes a structure. What the new balance is based on. Grandchildren. They are silent. But they listen. Sometimes I catch their eyes on me. The same way they look at old films, like something from the past, but interesting. I don't tell them that this isn't a movie. That I'm still here. That my mind is still sharp, even though my fingers sometimes don't listen. I don't compete. I simply exist, in a way that no one can ignore anymore. The world hasn't changed. But I've learned to be a player in it again. Old age is not the end. It's a form. And if used correctly, it can make even the indifferent feel like they're in the eye of the storm. I closed the last page of my diary. It contained no names. No dates. Just one sentence. My final word. My final voice. Never forget, the quietest voices sound the loudest when the world isn't listening. But everyone will have to listen. I stroked the cover of the notebook. I put it on the shelf. An old globe was nearby. And dawn began to shine through my window. Calmly. Without anxiety. Without shouting. Without apologies. But with respect. I'm alive. And that's payback enough. Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.